Live from the Avenue Bar in Madison, Wisconsin, it's WisEye Fish Fry, a show about policy, punditry, and politics, set in the state's favorite hangout for the movers and shakers in the political scene. So come on in, I'll get you a cozy booth, and I highly recommend the cod sandwich. Enjoy the show.
Thanks, Sean. I'm so glad that Jackie Johnson of Wisconsin Radio Network, thanks for agreeing to be the co-host here.
Oh, it's great fun.
How long have you been covering the Capitol?
13 years this month, as a matter of fact.
And any special issues that you specialize in?
Oh, mostly the stuff, whatever's going on at the state capitol, and as you know, as of late, it's been pretty busy there, with the legislature.
You weren't there all night?
No,
one of your partners was?
Yeah. Fortunately, I wasn't there all night. I'm doing a different shift, but we're all kind of divvying it up a little bit.
And why do you enjoy WisEye Fish Fry?
Well, this is nice that it's live on location. It's exciting, and
we get cheese curds.
Yeah, I'm eyeing those already.
I understand.
For sure. Yeah.
I understand. We do have some events coming up. The public hearings. Why don't you give the dates and times for those?
Well, so
Joint Finance.
We're talking about the Joint Finance Committee. They just got done doing all the budget, the agency budget briefings is what they call it. And they were sitting there, I think the DNR was there for 3.5 hours talking before the panel. And, talking about their budget and what kind of money they need. So now the Joint Finance Committee is going to go to the road, going to go on the road, and they'll be pretty much in all four corners of the state. And so I wrote this down so I don't forget, but Brillion, which is sort of east central Wisconsin, they'll be over there, they'll be down in Milwaukee, they'll be in Sauk City, in Reedsburg, and then they'll be up in Rice Lake.
Yeah, those public hearings.
I wanted to ask Erpenbach about this, but the time goes by so quickly. But if I recall from previous times, they're going to do this all day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the biggest issues, the UW, transportation funding, Medicaid, 2/3, 62% of all new tax collections are going to go for Medicaid. Bob Lang told me today. So how do you see this budget? The squeeze, the fiscal squeeze.
They're going to have to make a lot of changes because I think with regard to bonding for transportation, I think lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle kind of have an issue with that large amount of borrowing. So that's and then the UW, because the $300 million cut to the UW, even System President Ray Cross, he's willing to make adjustments in exchange for some tools, but it's too much, he says. So. And
Senator Nass just came out against it, which means the Republicans are down to a pretty thin margin in terms of that governance change.
Yeah.
So, who would you like to see in sitting across from us for WisEye Fish Fry? Do you think we'll ever get Scott K. Walker?
He just might come along. I don't know. If we bring some ham and cheese sandwiches and some cranberry juice, we just might get him to sit here with us.
I hope so. Jackie, thanks for being the co-host. And hey, are ready?
Is it all right to have one now?
Yeah, let's go.
Should we cheers? Yay.
Okay, cheers, yay.
Oh, this
Thank
is
you.
really good. Thank you.
Back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Steve. You're watching WisEye Fish Fry live from the Avenue Bar in Madison, Wisconsin. Now that Steve and Jackie are welcoming their guests, it's time to tell you about some of our drink specials, like the Avenue Bar's famous Old Fashioned. Back to you, Steve.
Our first WisconsinEye Fish Fry guest is Tourism Secretary Stephanie Klett. Thank you so much for joining us.
I cannot tell you how honored I am to be your first guest.
Yeah, but that's the good news. The bad news is we're only going to give you 7 minutes because we're so busy.
That's a warm-up.
Okay.
Stephanie can talk fast.
Tourism, $18 billion business.
We are. $17.5 billion.
What's bigger, winter or summer?
Summer all the way. Summer's number one, and followed by fall. We really own fall when it comes to all the Midwest states, so that's our number 2 season, spring and winter. But don't think winter's down here. It's a really important multi-billion-dollar season for us.
You sell fun, don't you?
I do.
Yeah. Well, I'm tempted. Okay, we got to go there. Why did you bring Long Live Limburger?
Well, because I am your reigning Limburger queen. I am America's first Limburger queen, and it's something that happened in 2014 at the 100th anniversary of Greene County Cheese Days.
And it's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. 100,000 people come to Little Monroe, Wisconsin for this festival where they celebrate everything cheese. And they ate 6,500 pounds of cheese, including Limburger. But literally, this is no joke, people come from around the world and wait in line for their deep fried cheese curds for hours. And if you see any footage of it all or photos, you'll see people wrapped around that beautiful historic courthouse in Monroe waiting in line for the cheese curds. Curd is the word.
Jackie was telling me you've got a new ad. Jackie, go ahead.
Yeah, we can talk about the new ad, because what I find really interesting about this is the producers of the ad. This is not the first time that they've helped you out.
No, David and Jerry Zucker, who are brothers, of course, raised in Shore, Wisconsin, and Jim Abrams did this ad for us. And it is starring, we're very excited about this, Coach Bo Ryan. Woo!
What's he going to do? Come on.
I'm going to give you a little teaser. I'm going to give you a little teaser.
We put cheese curds in front of you. Teases.
And
Go ahead.
curd is the word. I'm a curd nerd.
All
That's
right.
what I got to tell you.
All right.
We did some things that aren't in his contract to do. He actually had to call UW to ask if he could do some things that were slightly more dangerous. So let's just say you may see him ziplining or on top of a water skiing pyramid at Tommy Bartlett's in Wisconsin Dells. You may. You didn't hear it from me. But he does some crazy things, and he shows people what fun is all about in Wisconsin.
And so we're talking about fun in Wisconsin in the springtime.
Oh no, this is our summer ad.
The summer ad.
So this will air.
Where's it going to run?
Summer
Which market?
2015. It's going to air throughout the Midwest. It'll air in Wisconsin as well, but Illinois and of course Chicago is a huge market for us. 24.5% of our visitors to the state come from the greater Chicago area. Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth, into Iowa, a little bit of Michigan and Indiana.
And just about money, if we could talk just for a second about that. We're talking about the Zucker brothers and Abrams, who are from UW. They graduated from UW, and they gave you the family discount?
They did, because we could never afford their real rate. Their real rate, by the time they did the whole process, would probably cost us our entire marketing budget. So,
Which is how much?
We have $12.5 million to market, but immediately from that money comes all of these programs we have to do by statute, like our GEM grant programs and our sports initiatives. So really, when you get down to it, it's about $7 million. And when you think that one Super Bowl ad for 30 seconds is $4.5 million, we have to be really, really good with our money.
The Bo Ryan ad starts when?
March 14th.
Is there a basketball in the ad? You can tell us that.
There is indeed, my friend.
There is
a basketball.
There is going to be a basketball.
There may be a little game going on. There may be some angst.
You've had your job for what, 5 years?
This is beginning my 5th year.
How has tourism in Wisconsin changed over that 6 years?
Well, thanks for asking that question. Families are more intergenerational now when they advertise, when they vacation. When I advertise, I've got to focus on that. So that's a big thing, is that it's really about extended families. Also, single folks like myself are not afraid to travel alone. So single travel is up, family travel is up. It's really changed in the last 4 or 5 years. Being a foodie is a big deal. People love culinary tourism, so that is something that is just skyrocketing. So we're really doing a lot of different culinary advertising as we go forward. Those are just a few of the trends. Probably the biggest is international travel. It is the growth market for the United States, and that's including Wisconsin. We're up $200 million in the last 2 years in international travel.
From which countries? I know Jackie's got a different question, but from
the United Kingdom
Okay.
and Germany and Japan. But Brazil is a huge market, and they pay cash and they love to shop, so we're after them. And everybody's after the Chinese visitor, because literally if they're here for 2 to 3 weeks, which is usually what their vacations are, if they get here they're going to see a lot of different things, they spend twice as much as our European visitors. So everybody is after that market.
Well, I wanted to mention something else, but first, along the lines of what you're talking about now is food. Agritourism, that's kind of a growing industry, isn't it?
It's so huge. For us, we don't separate ourselves. Agritourism is a big deal. Well, the Greene County Cheese Festival, that was agritourism. Cranberry Fest, Warren's Cranberry Festival, largest in the world, that's agritourism. Our breweries, our wineries, agritourism. So for us, it's one and the same. It's very important.
And then just a quick follow-up on the winter thing. You know, winter is a great season for us.
Yes.
For tourism, but man, the past couple of years, you got a real boost up north in Bayfield.
You didn't see
caves.
that ice cave bump coming, did you?
For this year or last year?
Last year.
Last year was so unexpected. It was the greatest gift we could imagine. And not just a gift for what it did financially, but what it did for putting Wisconsin internationally on the map. If you talk about the power of social media, what happened with the ice caves was just, I don't know. I don't even have the words to express how thrilled we are about the ice caves and that gift. And of course, they open again this year.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so let me ask this question. As you're aware, the governor's budget would raise fees to use the state parks, camping. Would that hurt tourism, Stephanie?
You know, I don't know that it would hurt tourism, because I think what would hurt tourism more longer is if in the long run is if we didn't put money for infrastructure in those state parks. We need more money to maintain their excellence, and so I think that's a really critical part to the issue.
Okay, very good. Tourism Secretary Stephanie Klett,
I don't
thank you
leave.
so much.
I want to
understand.
eat my curd.
Well, we have other guests.
That's good.
Thank you very much. It is good, of course. Avenue Bar, cheese curd. Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Back,
Can I get a picture with you guys?
Sure,
You sit right
sure.
there.
and we're going back to you, Sean.
Well, now that Steve and Jackie are welcoming their guests, I have time to tell you about our Friday night specials. We've got award-winning beer battered cod or the fish boil, and of course, every night's prime rib. Let's get back to Steve and Jackie.
Our next guest on WisconsinEye Fish Fry, State Senator John Urfenbach. I know you're on a busy schedule.
That's all right.
Your part-time job, so thanks for stopping in.
Sure.
The right to work debate just ended a couple hours ago in the Assembly. Senate Democrats fought it for like 2 to 3 hours. Assembly Democrats fought it for about 20. Why? What am I missing here?
It was more than 2 or 3 hours, but just take a look at the numbers. There's 33 of us and 99 of them. So you just kind of...
3 times as long?
Yeah.
Okay.
But, you know, Democrats especially had a lot to say on this, a lot. In the Senate, pretty much all the Democrats talked. I think 1 or 2 Republicans did. Obviously, Republicans talked in the Assembly. But this is an issue that is very, very passionate on either side. We chose to try and defeat it, so did the Assembly Democrats, and the Assembly Republicans, at least in the Senate, just chose to vote and not really debate it. But yeah, I mean, you bring an issue up like this, which first of all, we don't need in the state of Wisconsin. This is probably one of the biggest political jokes I've ever seen played on the people of the state of Wisconsin. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But if we're going to do it, then obviously we're going to stand up and we're going to talk about it.
Do you have a follow-up on that, Jackie,
Yeah,
before I go to a new
say,
subject?
Okay, well, you know, the Republicans are saying the status quo is easy, it's familiar, and change is hard and scary, but when they figure out what this is about, you know, then they'll be okay with it.
Well, it's not about anything, because what the law says it's going to do pretty much already happens in the state of Wisconsin. You don't have to be in a union to work anywhere in the state of Wisconsin. No place. We talked about the Journal Sentinel. I'll use that as an example. It's a union shop, but not everybody at the Journal Sentinel newspaper belongs to the union because they choose not to. They can opt out. So this whole worker freedom stuff and all this freedom and, you know, this is America, darn it, and so on and so forth, really is a joke on the people of the state of Wisconsin. We spent a lot of time on really nothing in the end, except this will weaken private unions, which is what the legislation really is all about. But make no mistake about it, you do not have to be in a union to work anywhere in the state of Wisconsin. And the Republicans say that you have to. No, you don't. And so to me, it was a big waste of time and really irresponsible. It really was.
It's on the governor's desk. Is this all part of his campaign for president, John?
It depends on which day you ask him. One day it's a distraction, and the next day we decided to bring up right to work. You know, for Scott Walker, I've known him for a long time, and he's changed. If it's in the best interest of Scott Walker, then it's in the best interest of Scott Walker, and that's the way he's looking at life right now. And in the meantime, what we're dealing with in the state budget and everything else, you know, Wisconsin is in a shambles right now. And so, yeah, he'll sign it and he'll take credit for it and so on and so forth, when a month ago he said it was a distraction.
John, I'm going to ask a larger question. Why is your party on a losing streak in the 2012-2014 elections, and what is it going to take to turn that losing streak around?
Well, legislatively, it's really easy to explain redistricting. And even congressionally, it's redistricting. The Republican seats are more Republican, the Democratic seats are more Democratic, and there's not a lot in between anymore. You've been knocking around this building a long time. legislative races used to be very competitive. There was a Democrat in Waukesha County for the longest time by the name of Lynn Edelman. That won't happen again because of redistricting. It's like we're putting up these walls. It's isolationism. That's what's going on. And the more we do that, the more divided we become as a state. So legislatively and congressionally, there's not going to be a lot of competition. Tammy Baldwin, on the other hand, won statewide. President Obama won twice here statewide. The last time this state went for a Republican governor, I think, was Reagan. So statewide, it's a totally different story. But when you look at the things legislatively, I'm not surprised that the Republicans have the majority because that was the way it was written into the law with redistricting.
Your party's going to be electing a new chairman in June. Do you support your predecessor, Joe Winnicke?
Yeah, I do.
Then is it a matter of crafting new vision for the party that will sell in the 2016 and beyond elections?
It's a matter of a couple of things, and actually I think the Republicans are giving Democrats a leg up right now simply because of the agenda we're having to deal with at the Capitol. Governor Walker promised 250,000 jobs. You have to pass Act 10 in order to get them, and now we need right to work in order to get them, and we're not even close to the figure that the governor promised. But you know, that was last term, and now we're on to different promises and new and everything else. So the more Republicans push this state to the extreme right, the better it will be for the Democrats and the moderate Republicans even. Because I know there's some Republicans who don't like, for example, what's in the state budget and want to make some changes and so on. So things will swing back. They will.
Yeah, no, I mean, speaking of the budget, that's a great segue. I mean, a lot of budget briefings going on, and you're a member of Joint Finance.
They were a lot of fun, yeah. Really exciting.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. I mean, so many, obviously the money. It's a controversial issue to talk about the money, not enough. And do you want to talk specifically maybe about the DNR and the Advisory Board?
You teased out of Secretary Stepp that they're thinking about selling the naming rights to parks, and that was news to me. Was that news to you?
Before you asked it?
Secretary Stepp had said something during the questioning that I had that kind of set off an alarm in my mind saying, no, wait a minute, she just said that they may be working with people to sell naming rights. So I asked her. So that's how that came out. Let's start with the boards, for example. There are two major citizen boards here in the state of Wisconsin, the DNR board and DADCAP. The governor has taken away the authority from these citizens board. At the same time with WIDC, the agency that's been unaccounted for I don't know how many millions of tax dollars that have come and gone to businesses through there, the governor creates this new advisory panel and gives them the authority to deal with WIDC with absolutely no legislative oversight whatsoever. So it tells you where the governor's priorities are on that thing. The other two biggies obviously are the $300 million cut to the UW system, which they said is too much, too soon, and then borrowing $1.3 billion.
But I've not heard anybody in your party raise your hand to say, let's raise the gas tax or the motor vehicle. Which ones, Senator?
Me.
Gas tax?
Yes.
Transportation, the $75?
No. Here's the deal. Remember indexing? We used to index the gas tax automatically.
It ended in 2006.
Under Governor Doyle. And it's really funny because the date they picked was April 1st. They could have picked a better date to raise a tax. But talk radio took over this, automatic, unaccountable gas tax increase, whatever. Point is, had indexing stayed on the books, we would have had about $960 million more in our transportation fund. We wouldn't need to be borrowing that.
Right.
Absolutely, the gas tax should go back on the books, and it should be indexed.
Okay.
The gas tax is a tangible thing. We see exactly what it goes for. And now with the constitutional amendment that passed that says we being the legislature, governors, can't take from the transportation fund, that money will stay there. So that should make even the most conservative Republicans more comfortable with the idea of a gas tax. But there is no way in the world that we're going to have a world-class university system, continue to fund our K-12 system, try and fund their pet project in the school choice program, deal with the transportation budget, cut funding from state parks and all of this stuff. The responsible person has to stand up and say, wait a minute, we should look at taxes, we should look at fees, everything should be on the table. Do we need an on average $5 property tax cut at the expense of public schools right now? No, we don't. And so hopefully we'll make some changes in the budget when it comes to DNR, transportation, K-12 funding, and certainly the UW system.
Okay, we're almost out of time. Two quick questions, John. Number one, did you ask to be on finance to keep your name in the speculation to run for Gov in 2018?
No, Oliver Stone, I didn't. That's I've never heard that one. I'm sorry.
Well, it's interesting.
Cheese curd? No, no, I've never heard that.
Okay, you didn't. Okay, that's fine. Second, show us the wedding ring.
Yes.
There's one less bachelor in the Capitol.
Yeah, I got married middle of December. We had a Packer party at a restaurant in Middleton, and actually Shirley Abramson married us at halftime.
Okay.
So the entire ceremony was like, with commercials, maybe 6 minutes. It was awesome, but we're very happy, and I haven't been married for, we've been married now for 35, 38 years. No, it's just been a couple of months. It's great. So,
State Senator John Urban,
all right, good
thanks
to
for
see you
joining
guys.
WisEye
Yep.
Fish Fry. Thank you. Stay tuned for our next guest. Thanks, John. Our next WisEye Fish Fry guest is Railroad Commissioner Jeff Plaley. Jeff, thanks very much for stopping in.
Well, hey,
dive into the
if you got cheese curds, I'm there.
The good news is we're very glad you're here. The bad news is we got so many guests. We're giving you 6 minutes and we're counting. Okay?
I'll be quick.
Okay, let's start with something on your website. Rail traffic in Wisconsin is growing exponentially. Trains are running through the state at higher speeds more frequently, sometimes on lines that either have been closed or have not seen trains in years. What are you telling? You're talking here about danger, safety issues.
Well, not danger. I don't want to get anybody panicked, but I want people to be aware. I started this job 4 years ago, and it is amazing how much different the industry is here in Wisconsin. A couple things are driving that. Frac sand is leaving the state at exponential rates. If you go up north and you look around, and it's just changed the complexion of the state. And then crude oil coming through the state has also grown. We've always had oil in the state, but not at this volume. And then the container cars that are coming from Asia come across Canada on their way to Chicago. Well, there's only a way to get from Duluth to Chicago, and that's through Wisconsin. So it has changed dramatically. And again, I don't want to scare people, but I want people to have an awareness that, when you see, I've got the Operation Lifesaver logo on. And the motto is see, track, think, train, because there are lines that have come to life that people, an entire generation, haven't seen a train on that line.
Jackie, you were talking about the explosion near Galena.
Exactly. I mean, and that's right across the Wisconsin border. It's not really far from here. It's by Dubuque.
Just yesterday.
It was
just yesterday afternoon.
yeah.
It's still going on right now. And as a
It
matter of
is.
fact, not only is it right across the border, but the train actually had been just moments earlier traveling through.
Just
Wisconsin.
minutes earlier, it had come into the state of Wisconsin from Minnesota, went through La Crosse, went through Prairie du Chien, and all the little towns along the river. And again, I don't say that to get people worried, but again, just to have an awareness that these things can happen. I mean, that's why they're called accidents, because railroads don't know state borders. And again, they still aren't, they're investigating. It could have been the track, it could have been a train car. But it's still under investigation.
Well,
and
can I
Go ahead.
follow up on that? And I know this is a word you don't like to touch on, but accidents. You said that's why they're called accidents. You were at a committee hearing at the state capitol the other day, and one of the lawmakers, Dano, said he doesn't call them accidents, because an accident implies an act of God or something like that. This is a mishap that could have been prevented.
well, I suppose any incident can be prevented, and we go to great lengths to make sure they are prevented. And I don't want to split semantic hairs, but we work very hard with partners in the railroad industry, with local governments, to make sure that the tracks are in good shape, that the crossings are safe, that the proper circuitry is there, and that's on the proactive side. Also, same church, different pew, Brian Satula over at Emergency Management. I spoke with him early this morning. They keep the first responders as prepared as we can. There's a big training center out in Pueblo, Colorado, and many firefighters in the state have been there. Many more are going. There's a huge cache of foam up at Volk Field, and the foam is used to put out the oil fire should there be one. And you prepare for the worst, and you pray to God that it never happens.
But Jeff, what about the volume of oil coming through Wisconsin? Is it coming? Number one, is it coming down through along the Mississippi River, or is that the most popular route for the crude oil being shipped?
There's two types of crude oil. There's the Bakken crude, which is coming out of North Dakota primarily, and the two lines that carry that oil in Wisconsin are the Burlington Northern, which is the one that hugs the river, and then the Canadian Pacific, which kind of traverses through the state, that actually comes through Milwaukee County on its way down to Chicago. The other type of crude that comes through is the heavy crude, which is not volatile at all, and that's coming from the oil sands in Canada. but because the Bakken crude is a much lighter crude, it has a higher flash point. And
that's the one you're worried about.
That's the stuff that keeps me.
Okay, you've been on the job since 2010.
Yes.
What's the percentage increase of oil shipments through Wisconsin in your tenure? Is it 3 times as much, 5 times as much, 10 times?
No. I would have to get you an exact number, but suffice it to say, it's a lot. I mean, we're seeing 40 to 50 oil trains on this Burlington Northern line a week, and 4 years ago, I would say maybe 20. So I mean, in that sense, it's jumped quite a bit. Now, the Canadian Pacific line, I'd have to double check those numbers, but they call them rolling pipelines, and that's what they are.
Are you saying, we're almost out of time, are you saying that a Galena type incident, it's not a question of if, it's when in Wisconsin, Mr. Commissioner?
I really don't want to say it in those words, but if you look around the Midwest, just a couple of weeks ago we had an ethanol spill in Iowa. We had a train explode in West Virginia. We've had it in North Dakota, obviously in Lac-Megantic. We've been very fortunate. And I don't want to say it's inevitable, but we're prepared in the event that it does happen.
West Virginia and in this one yesterday in Galena, both of them had higher standards of safety than the federal government requires.
In the construction of the car, and that again goes to the point that nothing is ever 100% foolproof. You can design a better rail car, you can design a better system of taking the volatile gases out of them, but again, when you have that type of a commodity, it's never foolproof. But I will say, that 90, and this is a stat from the AAR, Association of American Railroads, that 99.997% of all rail shipments make it from point A to their destination without incident. No other form of transportation can claim that. It's a very, very safe way of transporting goods, much safer than any other form, but when it goes wrong, it goes wrong.
We're out of time. Railroad Commissioner Jeff Paley, thanks for joining WisEye Fish Fry.
My pleasure,
grab
and
some
curds,
thank
you for the cheese
Grab some curds on your way out.
All
Thank
right,
you so much, Jeff.
you.
Good to see you again. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Stay tuned for our next guest. Our next WisEye Fish Fry guest, Scott Hassett, who spent 5 years as Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources, back to the law practice. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here to help kick this show off.
Well, DNR is in there's a river of news involving DNR.
There is.
We found out at the budget hearings that the Governor Walker administration would like to consider selling naming rights, partnership to state parks. As a former DNR secretary, how do you respond to that?
I think it's a bad idea. What they're trying to do with parks overall, I think, is short-sighted in terms of.
They want to make them self-sustaining. Excuse me
yeah,
for interrupting.
And I don't think that's really worked anywhere, that model. And I just think they're looking at it wrong. They want to make it self-sustaining based on revenues that it generates with camping fees and things of that nature. And they're not taking into account the economic benefit of the parks overall, just as a matter of tourism. People that are coming and spending money in the area, whether it's food or gas or recreation.
So it doesn't make policy sense or fiscal sense?
Right. That's my position. We've got one of the finest park systems in the country, and I think people here sometimes maybe take that for granted. But it's won national awards, and it's part of who we are. And I think it's very short-sighted. I think the total budget cut is about $7 million. It's $4 to $5 million, plus a couple million in road aids. And given the size of the budget, I just don't think it's something that they should do.
Well, we're talking about parks. I mean, the next best segue is talk about the Stewardship Fund, because they're talking about cutting money to that. So it'd be over a decade before the state could buy any more land.
Same thing. That's one of the crown jewel programs of the DNR. I mean, it was a program that I just loved to administer. It was all the feel-good stories, and it was bipartisan. The origins were bipartisan. And I think there's a lot of bipartisan support for it now, and there may be some blowback, I'm assuming, and I hope this doesn't go through. But I used to have to go in front of hearings and argue for stewardship funding, and they would talk about bonding, the same debates we're having now. And I would urge them to look at it the same as if they're purchasing infrastructure. Only this is infrastructure, you've only got one opportunity, because there's a lot of land, for instance, now there's a lot of opportunities with baby boomers aging and turning over properties. And once that's lost, a lot of it may be lost forever, or it becomes fragmented and subdivided. So right at a time when we're increasing opportunity, we're eliminating, at least proposing to eliminate the funding. And I just think it's wrong. When you talk about, Cabela's is building a big new facility out here. They know the economics of outdoor recreation, whether it's hiking, biking, backpacking, hunting, and fishing. And one of the reasons, for instance, there's concerns about losing people that are engaged in hunting, and one of the issues is always access, public access. And again, that's something we take for granted here because we have had such a wonderful program. You can go to other states and try to go hunting, and you've got to join a club and pay dues or lease land to do something like that. This is unheard of in a lot of other states.
And just real quick, because Kathy Stepp is not here right now, the current secretary, and she would say that in lieu of buying new land, what they need to do is pay off their credit card right now. So
the Fiscal Bureau said debt service $570 million over the years of the Stewardship Fund.
Yeah.
That's a big number, Scott. Was just piggybacks on
Well,
Jackie's.
look at what the debt they're incurring for the transportation fund is $1.5 billion this year. That's more than the entire history of the stewardship since it went in 25 years ago.
Okay.
So it's all relative, but I look at it as infrastructure and investment in the future.
I think before you left as secretary, I think Gogebic announced plans for that huge mine up in Ashland and Iron. Well, fast forward 5 years later, they've now pulled the plug on it. Was that mine ever feasible? Would it have damaged the environment? Are you surprised they pulled the plug?
I'm not surprised. What I thought and what a lot of other people thought, and I don't know how much this was out there in the press, that there's never going to be a mine up there, and probably because of tribal rights and because of litigation that ultimately would have resulted. Bad River is downstream from that, and right now they were asking the EPA to intervene, but that's different from litigation. And I think the rights of the tribes would have trumped this and made a lot of problems ultimately as this played out. So, as I said, a lot of people thought there would never be a mine anyway, but they underestimated the number of wetlands were there. As I understand it, even the DNR maps didn't show the huge number of wetlands that were there. I think overall it's a relatively small number of jobs in exchange for digging a pit 4 miles long and a mile wide.
Yep.
So it's a good thing. In my opinion, if it's ending, I didn't think it would end this way, that they'd pull the plug in this manner.
You want to ask about the DNR Advisory Board?
Well, yeah, that's the question.
Well, that's
they talked about that a lot. And how did it work when you were the secretary of the department?
It worked very well. It's important to have public input. It's important to have a buffer in decision making. The origins of the board was the late 20s, and there is recognition that these are very controversial issues. You're making long-term natural resource decisions, and you don't want them determined by a short-term election cycle, whether it's deer management or rules and regs that are going through for air and water. The problem is now, if it goes through, one entity can get their way with a phone call to the governor's office instead of having to go through that buffer of the board, which is very important because the agency is one of the most political there is in terms of pressures, because you have it's also a unique agency. There's only 3 or 4 other states that have both your EPA function and your natural resource function under one umbrella. Okay? It's a wonderful thing that we can talk about water quality and fish management in the same agency. Totally different in other states. But you also have to insulate that from political pressures. And some group, I would say, just hypothetically, the WMC,
Yeah.
they would like very much, for instance, to be able to make a call to the governor's office on a rule or regulation and not have to worry about going through all the public input in the board and
that's a
everything
no.
that happens in that
That's a
process.
no. Okay.
A no? Oh, am I in favor of what of the proposal?
Right.
That's a no.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're out of time. So thanks, Scott. When you come to Fish Fry at the Avenue Bar, what type of beer do you order?
Well, I mix it up a little bit. This
Okay.
this is a Stella today.
Stella today. Okay. Scott Hassett, thanks very much.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you for tuning in to WisEye Fish Fry. And tune in next week when we'll have a whole new set of guests talking about a whole new set of issues. Enjoy your weekend.
Sauerkraut und tanzt am besten Polka.